Nasal irrigation devices and techniques for illness, allergies, and wellness. Nasal irrigation is a personal hygiene practice in which the nasal cavity is washed to flush out mucus and debris from the nose and sinuses. In order to enhance nasal breathing, nasal irrigation can also refer to the use of saline nasal spray or nebulizers to moisten the mucous membranes. So we have different nasal cavities, and in the maxillary sinus cavity, it drains itself very poorly because of where it sits on the face and due to gravity. So this is one of the reasons why we want to use nasal irrigation when we are congested. When we use nasal irrigation, we put the tip in one nostril, let the water go through the nose to the back of the face, all the way back to throughout the other nostril. Let's say you get sick with a respiratory virus. It lands in your nasal cavity. The virus replicates. As it's replicating, the walls in your nasal cavities thicken, and then you get mucus, and now you're congested. We grab our nasal irrigation device and we flush out all the mucus and all the virus particles. And we do this while we're sick to relieve our congestion. Some decongestants ease nasal congestion by reducing the swelling of blood vessels in the nose. They do this by acting on receptors to constrict the blood vessels in the tissue that lines the nasal cavity. Decongestants are available in the form of both nasal sprays and tablets. I used to use Sudafed often for my seasonal allergies, and I noticed a 12-hour version would keep me up at night. So I would only use a 24-hour version early in the morning. Now, I don't recommend Sudafed for COVID because it constricts blood vessels, and COVID is known to cause blood clots. So when you constrict blood vessels and you're suffering from a disease that causes blood clots, you're just going to have more severe disease, so it's a bad idea. So this is again why I recommend nasal irrigation so much. Guaifenesin is an expectorant. It thins and loosens the mucus in your lungs, making it easier to cough it up. Basically, sticky mucus becomes more watery. I recommend the generic versions. It's much cheaper, but this does work, and I think more people should consider it when they're congested. Now, why take pills? Nasal irrigation works directly and quickly. In the first image, we have mechanisms of action of nasal irrigation. It's pretty simple: mucus lining dislodgement, and that's going to lead to less pathogens inside your nasal cavities. In the second image, you can see 2 hours after using nasal irrigation, your nose will be less swollen. Symptom relief from nasal irrigation. This comes from a study that looked at nasal irrigation, and it relieved or reduced all of these symptoms listed. Nasal anatomy. So I wanted to show this again. The maxillary sinus is very difficult to drain, and this is very important for nasal irrigation. But you also have other sinuses that you may not realize exist, like above your eye, and that part can get congested and it can give you headaches. The nasal cycle. So I'm sure you notice you usually breathe through one nostril. This is 100% normal. Your body switches what nostril you breathe out of every 20 minutes to 4 hours. And this is something that we should be aware about, and I listed the medical definition here for further information, and it's just something we don't really think about, but we know about. So when you're congested, it can actually change the temperature inside your nasal cavities, and it can also change the airflow rates. This is something just to be aware of. In the first image, nasal flow rate does not have the same resistance between patients, nor within the same person. One nostril could be stronger than the other. You can also actually achieve a higher flow rate during a congested state under certain conditions. So you can be sick, congested, and you might not even notice. The second image shows high and low airflow rates in the nasal cavities. The third image shows how you inhale air and how you exhale air. So when you're sick, let's say you start off with a sore throat, those virus particles can eventually be put into your nasal cavities. Nasal congestion cycle. So in the first image, you become congested from pathogens. The second image, you secrete thick mucus to help fight off these pathogens. The third image, your cells start to get damaged. The fourth image, because of the excess mucus secretions, you're going to have more inflammation in your tissues. The fifth image, because of all this extra mucus, you can develop a bacterial infection. So this is important to understand when you're getting sick. The process day by day or hour by hour even it's important to realize why nasal irrigation is so important to prevent your symptoms from getting worse or developing a bacterial infection. Respiratory system cilia. The cilia moves back and forth to move the mucus out of the sinuses and back out of the nose. The cilia can also be found throughout the respiratory tract. So when you're inhaling particles or viruses, the cilia, which looks like hair on top of the cells, brushes the particles back up and into your stomach to swallow. So this is very important to understand, that when we're congested, the cilia can't move particles as much, and then we can get sick or a bacterial infection. Viruses and the cilia. So when you inhale COVID virus particles, it attacks the cells and the cilia itself. In the second image, you can see when you're infected with a pathogen like virus or bacteria, it can damage the cilia and you can have a buildup of mucus, and this could lead to more severe disease. In the third image, you can see in different viruses how those particular viruses attack the cilia. So COVID, for example, actually can directly infect the cilia and cause further disease. Cilia defects and mucus accumulation. So when you become sick, the cilia can become damaged and you can have excess mucus accumulation, which again increases severity of disease. Congestion examples. In the first image, you can see healthy sinuses versus not so healthy. So when you're not so healthy, you're going to have more mucus, thicker walls, and you can have complete blockage of some of the sinus cavities. In the second image, you can see sinus congestion can depend on many variables. You may have allergies, you may have an ear infection, you might have a viral or bacterial infection. Regardless of the source, you can still use nasal irrigation to help you out. So in the first image, you can see perfectly healthy, normal sinuses. In the second image, you can see the sinus pathway become swollen. In the third image, the blocked sinuses start to fill with fluid, even though it doesn't show it in the image yet. In the fourth image, once it's filled up with fluid, you could develop a bacterial infection. Mucus colors. Clear means you're healthy. White means you might be coming down with an infection or cold. Yellow means your cold is getting worse. Green means it's getting much worse. Red means there's blood in your snot, probably due to dryness or irritation. Brown means pollution or external irritants or dried blood. Black means this could be a sign of serious fungal infection or pollution, external irritants. Nasal polyps are soft, painless, non-cancerous growths on the lining of your nasal passages or sinuses. They hang down like teardrops or delicious grapes. They result from chronic inflammation and are associated with asthma, recurring infection, allergies, drug sensitivity, or certain immune disorders. About 4% of people currently have nasal polyps, while up to 40% of people develop them at some point in their life. The olfactory bulb is a rounded mass of tissue that contains several types of nerve cells that are involved in the sense of smell. The olfactory bulbs receive information about smells from the nose and sends it to the brain by the way of the olfactory tracts. If you are congested, your sense of smell obviously isn't anywhere near as good when healthy. Nasal congestion may affect the sinus openings and the eustachian tubes, and may lead to difficulty or inability to clear the ears. Symptoms include oral fullness, ears popping, a feeling of pressure in the affected ears, a feeling that the affected ears is clogged, crackling, ear pain, tinnitus, autophony, and muffled hearing. Additional symptoms include dizziness, imbalance, lightheadedness, and vertigo. Sinus infections can cause swelling of the sinus cavities and the bones at the nasal passages near the eyes. Swelling and inflammation puts pressure around the eyes and its nerves, resulting in vision distortion, eye pain, and blurred vision. Studies have shown structural and functional optic nerve changes were correlated with the severity of chronic sinusitis. Post-nasal drip symptoms include overproduction of mucus in the throat, frequently clearing the throat, sore or scratchy throat, feeling like a lump or something stuck in the throat, constant spitting or swallowing of mucus, feeling of nausea due to excessive mucus in the stomach. Sinus drainage examples. I'm just posting this so you can get an idea of what's going on by looking at these images. Finger massage drainage. So in the first image, you can see how you can massage your sinus pockets to help loosen the mucus. And the second image shows different pathways you can take to achieve this goal. Me personally, I like to use my knuckles, but the experts recommend fingers. So when you just press on your skin and you just move your, the fingers around, you're going to loosen up some of the congestion. Virus testing. So when you're taking a virus test, that swab is picking up virus particles. So this is again why we do nasal irrigation, because that's where the virus particles are and replicating. Clip art and real tissue viral example. So I just want to show you where the virus particle is inside your nasal cavities. This is where the virus replicates and makes you sick. Here's another clip art and real example, so you can see where the virus particles are when you're sick. Normal mucus flow. As you can see, the mucus is always flowing inside your body, and the cilia is what brushes it across the way. Here's an animation of the sinus draining. Electronic nasal irrigation. In the first image, I tried a very similar device from Amazon. It was okay. The motor was not very strong. I did not think it would last very long, so I ended up returning it. In the second image, this is the device I use. It's very expensive, very loud, and comes with various tips. I like it, but it's just very expensive and very loud. On the third image, I have not tried this device, but I've read online comments, and my feeling is the device in the second image is worth it, whereas the device in the third image, just for the price and what you're getting, is not worth it, but each their own. Manual nasal irrigation. As you can tell from all three images, they come in various shapes and sizes. I believe the newer generation models are better to get the deep nasal cavities. And since these are made out of plastic, I want to notate that BPA-free plastic doesn't necessarily mean BPA-free. BPA alternatives also aren't necessarily safer. So you should ensure you store your bottle in the proper place away from direct sunlight. Adverse effects of nasal irrigation include nasal irritation, nosebleeds, headache, and drainage after the irrigation is done. There is a risk of infection if the water is not sterile or the device is not clean after use. If the electronic device is used improperly, it can also be harmful. In 2018, a patient was theorized to have contracted Balamuthia mandarillalis after 1 month of using tap water filtered through a Brita water purifier for nasal irrigation. In 2011, 2 people died from amoebas infections tied to using neti pots containing unfiltered tap water. A 2009 study did find that long-term use is associated with a higher incidence of sinus infection, possibly because it reduces the mucosal lining of the nose, making it more vulnerable to infection. I believe the reason why, if this is true, is because of volatile organic compounds. Distilled water does not remove volatile organic compounds, and something people should be aware about. Tap water isn't safe for use as a nasal rinse because it's not properly filtered or treated. Some tap water contain low levels of organisms, such as bacteria and protozoa, including amoebas, that may be safe to swallow because the stomach acid kills them, but in your nose, these organisms can stay alive in nasal passages and cause potentially serious infections. Use water that has been previously boiled for 1 minute and left to cool. Use a filter designed to remove some water-loving germs. The label may read NS53 or NS58. Filter labels that read absolute pore size of 1 micron or smaller are also effective. Use water with a label specifying that it contains distilled or sterile water. UVC and water-based ozone generators should also be considered. Distilled water is not purified. Distillation will not remove all the VOC chemicals but removes soluble minerals, calcium, magnesium, and others, and dangerous heavy metals like lead, arsenic, and mercury. Some of the chemicals of concern produce hazardous compounds during the heating process. That is, if you were to make distilled water at home. Purified water goes through different types of filtration. Some filtration types removes particles and or reduces VOCs. A 2017 study showed that bacteria can grow inside of a water filter. The same process happens with HEPA filters, and if this happens, it's not good to be drinking that water. Chlorine can actually go through the distillation process and end up in the water. Water filters are certified by the Water Quality Association. You can look up your filter's registration at this link here. Different water purifiers have different certifications, even within the same brand. Again, use a posted link to search to ensure your water filter is properly certified. So I noticed with some brands that some other filters were more certified versus others. So it's very important to look up your very particular model number when searching online. Some recommend that you do not use iodide salts, as iodide may include ingredients that irritate the nasal lining. Some recommend it. Your choice. Baking soda, purified, distilled, or boiled water. Mix 3 teaspoons of salt with 1 teaspoon of baking soda and store in a small airtight container. Add 1 teaspoon of the mixture to 8 ounces of water. Use less ingredients to make a weaker solution if burning or stinging is experienced. In my experience, sometimes that does happen if I use a salt-based solution. I usually just tough it out, but some people might want to water it down. You can purchase pre-made solutions online or at the store. They work well, they're just very expensive. I believe people should just use salt. I don't think you need to spend all that money. Irrigation efficiency. So as you can see, the nasal spray is far less efficient for the deep nasal passages compared to nasal irrigation. And this is again why I recommend nasal irrigation so much. This image comes from a study where doctors use nasal irrigation with different angles and ingredients. I mostly care about the angles here because, as you can see, using the device at different angles leads to different results. I believe every person should try alternate angles to see what works best for them. So how long should you use your irrigation device? Well, it depends. Each person's genetics is different. In this image, which comes from a study, showed the nasal cavity differences before and after surgery. So this person had very narrow or blocked nasal passages, and after the surgery it opened up. So some people might need to use your device longer to reach the deep nasal cavities. So you should experiment with yourself to see what works best. Nasal spray body position techniques. I am just posting this here for informational purposes. So if you use a nasal spray, you can adjust your body position to target certain sinuses more than others. So I believe this could be very helpful. I've not tried it myself, but thought you might be interested in seeing this. Irrigation example. Again, I don't recommend this particular product, just showing just as an animation. Water goes through one nostril and comes out the other nostril. Poor nasal cavity irrigation. So here we're using the device I don't recommend, and let me show you why. So when you're using this device, it's not going to reach all the sinus pockets, and this is really important because the whole purpose is to reach the entire nasal cavity. So the part highlighted in green, you're not going to get those parts that well with a device like this, and you're still going to be congested. Good nasal cavity irrigation. So with a device like this, using the proper tip, you can actually target the deep nasal cavities to ensure proper nasal irrigation. Viral nasal irrigation. One of the main reasons why we want to do this when we're sick is to literally knock out viruses from the nasal cavity. So as we're using the nasal irrigation device, it goes through one nostril and the virus particles leave through the other nostril. Nozzle types. I disagree with both of these marketing claims. They claim that the stronger spray will get the deep nasal cavities. In my experience, the nozzle type that delivers the weaker spray is more likely to get the deep nasal cavities. It just takes longer. I could be wrong, maybe it's just me, but that's what I experience. Sometimes people use water flosser devices for nasal irrigation. I think this is a bad idea. The spray is way too strong, too much pressure. I just really don't think this is a good idea. I don't think people should do this. Maybe newer generation models are better or have the feature built in better, but I just don't recommend it. Tongue scraper. In the first image, you can see an infected tongue from COVID and a healthy tongue afterwards. In the second image, you can see different colors of the tongue that give you an idea of the health status. In the third graphic, you can see a tongue scraper. You know, I actually never used this before, so I'm going to try it soon. But, you know, your tongue is part of your health. Humidifiers, vaporizers, and diffusers. There are different types of devices that put water in the air that helps with nasal congestion. When you use a vaporizer, just know that some flavor scents are toxic. Lavender, for example, can mess up your hormones. So you should look into every flavor or scent that you try and ensure that's actually healthy to use. Essential oil aromatherapy dangers. Recently there was a recall on an essential oil from Walmart, and 2 people actually died because there was bacteria in it. So it's something to be aware of, that you want to make sure you purchase high quality essential oils and always be aware of any recalls. Infant aromatherapy. Use eucalyptus oil. Monitor humidity with an air quality monitor. Go above 60% humidity, mold can become an issue. So when you're using a humidifier or diffuser or anything of that sort, your humidity is going to go off, and it's something to be self-aware of, because sometimes if you use too strong of a humidifier in a small room, you're going to have mold issues. When my nephew was an infant and he was congested, I used eucalyptus oil with a diffuser, and it helped with his congestion significantly. Nasal steamer. I own one of these devices. I have not used it yet. In my opinion, from everything I read, nasal irrigation is much better, but I will try this soon. I just wanted to post this here for informational purposes. Nasal inhalers. Just like essential oil, these come in many flavors, scents. I've had good experience with these. They usually last a few months. I used to use mine all the time before I got ionizers. I'm surprised these are not more popular because they're refreshing. Nasal liquid spray. These come in many formulas. It's very important to point it correctly inside the nostril when you're using it as shown in the image. Facial tissue. Obviously these are well known, but sometimes people might not know that there are antiviral types, or menthol with eucalyptus types, or lotion types. These are fancy. I don't think you need this. Just wanted to post it here for informational purposes. Negative ionized irrigation. So when you're not wearing an ionizer, your mucus can renew every 15 minutes. When you're wearing a negative ionizer, the Cecilia rapid fires, and it can renew much faster than 15 minutes. Ear congestion clearance. An ear popper blows air to help open up eustachian tubes. Various types of ear wax cleaning kits exist. You can also purchase a camera so you can look inside your ears for any sign of inflammation or earwax. I personally believe that the ear camera is very underrated because it allows you to see exactly what's going on in your ear. I had way more earwax than I originally thought many months ago, and the camera is how I figured it out. Lung airway clearance devices. It's like nasal irrigation but for your lungs. I plan on having a future video about this, but I just want to put a quick animation how you can use one of these devices to help clear up mucus or even blood clots inside your lungs. Microcurrent irrigation. This is actually an FDA approved device that stimulates congestion relief through electricity. I've never used this. I've read about it. Personally, I feel negative ionizers work better, but I just wanted to post this here. Light therapy nasal irrigation. I've used this for my nasal congestion. It's legit, it works. There are many studies on this. It's just very annoying. When I used it, I had to use it 30-minute sessions twice a day, and it wasn't the most comfortable thing, but it does work. So do you like the hydrogen water?
Yes.
Molecular hydrogen irrigation. So hydrogen water can be inhaled or it can be drank just as normal water. As you can see here, my nephew drank the water and inhaled it and enjoyed both instances. There's even studies about using molecular hydrogen to treat COVID. I've used this for over 2 years now. It's legit. It's something that I recommend. It's a little expensive, but it's a very interesting new science. When your indoor air quality is bad, you're going to have way more particles inside of your respiratory system. So it's very important to use an air quality monitor to know that your respiratory system is clean of toxic particles. Wellness irrigation. In my opinion, it's a good idea to use nasal irrigation at least once a week to remove accumulated air pollution in the nasal cavities of the respiratory system. Mold, traffic pollution particles, bacteria, and even VOC chemical infused dust particles can be lodged in. When you use nasal irrigation, even if you don't have any congestion at all, you're always going to be breathing so much better after you use it. Allergy nasal irrigation. In this study, they looked at nasal irrigation improving symptoms if you suffer from allergies, and guess what? It worked. Asthma nasal irrigation. These images come from a study where they used nasal irrigation for asthma, and again, it worked. The symptoms improved and the cells looked healthier afterward. Influenza nasal irrigation study. This study looked at people with the flu and without the flu using nasal irrigation. Of those without the flu, ended up having healthier cells after using nasal irrigation. Those with the flu were tested, and during the 4th office day visit, they had no signs of the flu in their nasal secretions. COVID nasal irrigation study. Participants 55 and older were enrolled within 24 hours of a COVID positive test, and they had to do nasal irrigation twice daily for 14 days. The results were the participants using nasal irrigation were over 8 times less likely to be hospitalized than the national rate. Nasal irrigation demonstration. Step 1. Ensure device is clean. Rinse empty at bathroom sink. Step 2. Add clean water. Step 3. Add any solutions if you like. Step 4. Try different angles. Some suggest your head being parallel to the floor as shown in the image. Find your comfort zone. Move, tilt around 45 degrees. See what you're comfortable doing. Step 5. Use the nozzle for the fast, strong option. Step 6. Use slow, deep nasal cavity option. Step 7. Have facial tissue as nasal discharge may occur for up to 30 minutes afterwards. So in the first image, your head is parallel to the floor. In the second image, you're at an angle. In the third image, you're upright. I usually do the first image parallel. I feel this helped me get the deep nasal cavities the best, but I would always adjust and see what felt the best that particular day. Experimental nasal irrigation. Press your fingers against one nostril. Use irrigation device in the other nostril. When you feel the slightest pressure at ears, stop using device. Swivel your head around for a bit, then remove finger and let the water drain out. Think of this like washing a bottle, shaking it with soap and water with the lid closed to help clean interior surfaces. This is what I do, and this is what helped me a lot. The thing is, this may be dangerous, or I don't even know if I would recommend it to someone. I'm just putting this here because this is what I did. So I wanted to get the deep nasal cavities very well, and I would just hold my finger against my nostril to prevent water from initially coming out, and then I would let go. So I just want to post this here. I felt that it helped me. It might help you. I don't recommend it because I feel this is very experimental, but sometimes people need a little extra help. Please let me know if you have any questions. I will make a video in the near future showing myself using various nasal irrigation devices and techniques.